Welcome to my top 5 must-haves and also 5 more recommended players to have in your SuperCoach sides. It is George from Fantasy Take TV. So very important that we nail all the players that we must have. You know, a lot of these guys have high ownership. So if you don't have these players, you will be left behind. So there might be a few where you don't have some of these players, but I'll try and make a strong case as to why you should pick them. And without further ado, I think we'll start with the 5 players I recommend, and then we'll get into the 5 players that I believe are absolute must-haves, no ifs, no buts. First two we'll go over is both Rosie and Timothy Taranto. So Rosie, we saw in the practice game, got 80% CBAs. If he goes anywhere near that, he's going to make a lot of money. Not that that matters because we're picking him as a keeper, but you know, star player, top 5 in the coaches' votes. It'll be interesting to see what he can do if he actually does get that 80% CBAs, but it does feel like Butters and Wine's underdone, so he might be the main man, but at the same time, he might receive a few tags. But nonetheless, at the price, priced in the 90s, did 105 in the midfield last year. If he gets even more CBAs, he could push a 110 average. He's one where you lock him in, don't think too hard about it, and move to the next pick. The next player I have is Tim Taranto. So Tim Taranto, you might be asking, what is he going to do? Is he going to butcher his way to a 100 straight average or not even hit 100? Well, historically, when he's had over 60% CBAs, he's actually averaged 110 over the past few years. But he hasn't really got many opportunities to score or get over 60% CBAs. So if he gets heavy midfield minutes, which is what it seems, you know, 70-75%, I'm not saying he'll go 110, but he could get close to it. And for that price, that's not something I would want to miss out on. So he is definitely in for me. A rookie in the forward line you definitely want is Fergus Green. So 42% owned. Now, he kicked, I believe it was 78 goals over 25 games across 2 years in the VFL. Looks fantastic. They look for him. He presents himself often, and he's the Gunston replacement for them. So he looks really good in the preseason. Not sure you want him on field. I think you could get some good scores, but also being a key position player, Hawthorn have a bad day, he'll probably have one too. So I think he's your F7, and I would not, wouldn't downgrade him to a loophole. He's not the one that you want to get rid of if you're looking to add someone else in that F7 spot. Definitely keep Fergus Green. He'll make some good money for us. In the midfield is Mackenzie, or Cam Mackenzie. So the reason why I think this pick is so important, and you might be thinking back to Josh Ward last year, you know, he didn't turn out super well. Hawthorn rookie, similar price, thought he'd get good mid-time, but he didn't actually get a lot of early mid-time. It was more on a wing, I think. And I think more of the mid-time came later in the year, whereas Cam Mackenzie, they've thrown him straight into centre bounces, and a CBA mid, he could be a top 3, top 4 CBA mid for 180k, and he performed really good. He's been a standout in a few training sessions, so he's not one that I'd be willing to fade. I'd definitely chuck him M7 or M8 wherever you can. And from his draft profile, it says he can be a little inconsistent, but nonetheless, we're getting a great job security, a player who will make a fair bit of money for us, and yeah, centre bounce mid. So might not always get fantastic scores out of him, but he's definitely one where I would definitely pick him. I think that mid-time and the way he looked in the preseason was fantastic. But yeah, temper your expectations, but he's not one I'd fade. And the last one is a little bit of an iffy one, but I just think Charlie Constable, this can go one of two ways. He can get dropped, or he's going to make serious bank. I think one of those two will happen. And for me, I think he'll play round 1. Stuart Dew has said that. And I'll play him on field, because how often do you get a 123k rookie on kick-ins? That's pretty wild. So those are my top 5 players I would highly recommend picking. If you don't have any, maybe let me know why, but nonetheless, I would definitely pick those. But yeah, back to Charlie Constable. Yeah, it's interesting to think what he could do. Maybe around an 80 average even. They had a few turnovers down back, so hopefully that doesn't continue. But I do remember, I think it was Sam Collins was on SEN, and they asked him like, who's a standout on the track, and he said Charlie Constable. So always a good sign. He'll get first opportunity and he'll score points. Chuck him on your field in round 1. Now my top 5 must-haves. Number 5, the Bont. So at least with Bont, we have a lot of alternatives, and you know, he might not start super quick, but Marcus Bontempelli, when fully fit, he could do, if you gave Bont 80% CBAs and he was 100%, and maybe he had one less mid taking points off him, he would do 140 points average. But that's not going to happen. Well, probably not anyway, but never want to doubt Marcus. I think he can push a 125, even up to 130 average this year. And at the price, 116 average with all the excuses he had last year, played through a few niggles, copped a nasty calf cork, played with a sore shoulder. He's already said he's going to play more midfield time this year. And they asked him about the Brownlow, and he said he's up for the challenge. I would not want to go up against this man at all this year. So he's flying, looks great in the preseason. Scored a 140 in his sleep, albeit against the Roos. But nonetheless, there's going to be a 200 game from Marcus this year, and I want to be on board that. So a bit cheaper than some of the top guys. Get him in, no ifs, no buts. King Marcus, and lock him away. The next must-have, even with the threat of Campbell playing throughout the year, is Rowan Marshall. If you're not aware, Rowan is a 115 average player when he is solo rucking. For 500k, I'm not sure that's something I want to go up against. His durability has been a bit iffy. I think the main thing with him is he's had on and off like a hot spot in his foot. He had that over a year span, I think, and I think it interrupted him a little bit in the preseason last year. Got off to a slow start. They were dual rucking as well, but he's fully fit, raring to go. And yeah, his practice game, if that's anything to go by, you know, he's got one of these massive 180 games in him, and you want to be on board. You don't want to anti-pod that. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Campbell. They didn't play him, he was available, and they didn't choose to play him in the second practice game. But nonetheless, Rowan Marshall, 53% owned for a reason. Him and Tim English were both the same ownership when SuperCoach opened, and he's put a bit of distance on that now. English is down to 18. That's a lot lower than I thought, but I'm glad, because I don't think I think he's a horrific pick. But yeah, good luck if you're going that route. So Rowan, you got to have. My number 3 must-have is Ruben Ginby. 61% owned. So coming into every new year of SuperCoach, I'm always a bit skeptical on the expensive rookies that have come through the draft, because you know they're 18, they've only got one preseason under their belt. But it does seem that this crop of midfielders it seems a very strong pool. You know, much stronger than 2 years ago when we had like Will Phillips and Finlay McRae, and none of them really fired in their first year. Whereas I think this year they all look outstanding. Also, the guys a few years ago would have missed footy due to the COVID years, but these guys have all been able to play full seasons. I would think last year, maybe not early, but nonetheless they would have played a lot more footy than previous years. But yeah, he looks fantastic. Endurance, massive endurance, can win the contested ball, and his body looks like it can hold up against the big dog. So in defense, where there's a lot of poor job security or sub risks, like the Brisbane boys could be sub risks, so could the Carlton boys back there. I don't think Ginby's a sub risk. I think they've got a few others that are ahead of him, but yeah, I would be surprised if he subbed. But certainly early, he should be raring to go, get a bit of midfield time. Again, we'll get CBAs. Pretty nice to get rookies that are getting CBAs this year. Lock him in and don't look back. The next player is Josh Dunkley. How could I forget? So Josh Dunkley has featured in my must-have videos for about 4 years straight. He's gotten injured a few years there, but he's up to 68% ownership now. So I think people are starting to make their teams and just throw in Dunkley. Like, it feels like 60% used to be 100%, and now it's starting to become 70% as more teams or more people are seeing what's going on. To remind you guys of what Josh Dunkley can do in a main midfield role, 2019 after round 5, Bevo did Bevo things, played him in the forward line for the first 5 weeks, but after that he averaged 125 or 127, one of the two. 100 go with 125, 15 Brownlow votes in that period. McRae had 22, Bont had 22. For me, that was as good as Libba is, that was the prime Bulldogs domination of, well, certainly SuperCoach wise anyway, and they won a lot of games in that period. 60 Brownlow votes between 3 players is pretty rare, or 59, but nonetheless, Dunkley is going to get that mid-time now. He might have to rest forward a little bit, but I can see 70% plus CBAs instead of the old 50 that he was getting at the Dogs. I dare say if he pushes 80, he could push Laird and Oliver and maybe Bont as well. Whoever you're rating at the top of the midfield rankings, he could push them and be a top, it'd be a top 5 midfielder, I think. So I know he's expensive, but you got to pick Josh Dunkley. If he fires like he does in the past when he's gotten a full midfield role, he's been waiting for this to get massive midfield minutes for a long time now, and he's one of the hardest workers in the AFL. So love Josh Dunkley as a player, and yeah, hard worker. So get him in and don't look back. And number 1 is obviously Will. I wanted to put a Crows player in, but couldn't really think of one besides Laird, but it's hard to justify 700k. Actually, we'll touch on Laird. Putting Setterfield, what am I sidetracked? Nonetheless, Will Ashcroft, I don't even need to say nothing. 76%, that's the highest I've ever seen anyone owned. I think injury is the only thing stopping him from rising star. Although, Gimby looks good, Sheasel looks pretty good, a few others as well. So I don't need to say nothing on Ashcroft. If you don't pick him, then you're tanking a league for a mate. If your mate's in a cashy and you've invited your mate and he's tanking on purpose or whatever, that's the only reason why you're not picking at Will Ashcroft. So I don't need to say nothing. You could argue, people are seeing what Laird can do in the preseason, or, he's already said he's put on 1.5 kilos. He was a little bit underdone coming in last season with the hand issue. It looks like he's in for a big year. He feels like he's in for a big year by the sounds of it. And he still has the midfield to himself. They gave our 3rd string mid was Schoenberg or Rankin or whatever. I think Schoenberg had 30% CBAs. They gave him all to Laird, who was rested pretty heavily as well, and Berry. And Laird, 140 or whatever it was off 70% time on ground. So against West Coast, it's whatever. So I don't think he's a must-have, but I think people are getting a bit freaked out by not picking Laird and his ownership. I did a TikTok video when he was 10% ownership. I don't know, probably 6-7 weeks ago, and it's jumped to 26. So I think he's a great pick and a lock in my side, but I don't think you have to pick people at 700k because you will get them cheaper. So my 5 main must-haves to go over them again: Bont, Rowan, Ginby, Ash, and Dunkley. Get them in. You probably already do. If not, you're tanking for a mate in a cash league if you've done some shifty job there. But nonetheless, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next one.